link page there.
And what about the mic in here?
Yeah, you can speak in this one.
right shift
Imam is here. मैं इधर आ जाऊँ?
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We'll try one more time. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you now and always. We will start our program. Inshallah, we have some very special guests who you may know. So we have Sheikh Muhammad, we also have Dr. Izhar and Imam Ibrahim Al-Wawi. We'll start with the Quran and then we'll go into our speakers, and then at the end we'll have a question and answer session. However, just be aware that it's 1:40 just now, and 2 o'clock will be the prayer time for Asr Jama'ah, and of course the adhan will be before that, at actually in 7 minutes at 1:48. So just be mindful of that and prepare yourselves accordingly, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Start with the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. وآتينا موسى الكتاب وجعلناه هدى لبني إسرائيل ألا تتخذوا من دوني وكيلا ذرية من حملنا مع نوح إنه كان عبدا شكورا. وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا. فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا. ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا. إن أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها. فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حصيرا إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا.
فتح الله عليك. جزاكم الله خير. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. Glorified be He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, glory be to Allah, who carried His servant, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, by night from the inviolable place of worship in Mecca al-Mukarramah to the far distant place of worship, Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem, the neighborhood whereof we have blessed, that we might show Him of our signs. Lo, He, only He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the hearer, the all-seer. We gave unto Moses alayhi salam the scripture, and we appointed it a guidance for the children of Israel, saying, choose no guardian beside me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were the seed of those whom we carried in the ship, along with Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam. Lo, he was a grateful servant, a grateful slave. And we decreed for the children of Israel in the scripture, you verily will work corruption in the earth twice, and you will become great tyrants. So when the time for the first of these two times comes, we roused against you slaves of ours of great power and might, who ravaged the country, and it was a threat performed. Then we gave you once again your turn against them, and we aided you with wealth and children, and made you greater in number and soldiers, saying, if you do good for your own souls, and if you do evil, then it is for your own souls again in a like manner. So when the time for the second of these judgments comes, we roused against you others of our slaves to ravage you and to enter the temple and the masjid even as they entered it the first time, and to lay waste to all that they conquered with an utter wasting. It may be that your Lord will have mercy on you, but if you repeat the crime, we shall repeat the punishment. And we have appointed hell a dungeon for the disbelievers. Lo, indeed, this Quran guides unto that which is the straightest, and gives tidings to the believers who do good works, that theirs will be a great reward. Sadaqallahu alayhi. It is now the time for Asr Adhan. So as mentioned, we'll have a break for the Adhan, and then after the Asr prayer we'll continue the program. So we'll have Dr. Izhar, and then we also have some special guests in the sisters department who will speak, and then we'll end with Shaykh Ibrahim bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Now the Adhan.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Time for Salah. Should I stop? No, okay. You can wait a little bit.
Okay. So we've decided actually we will bring Dr. Azhar to speak, and then immediately after Dr. Azhar finishes, we will pray Asr Jama'ah, inshallah.
Jazakallah Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that it is a privilege and an honor to share a platform with our beloved Imam Ibrahim from Gaza. If anyone knows what's happening in Gaza, there is nobody more than Imam Ibrahim who knows. He has experienced tremendous personal loss that we cannot even imagine. But at the same time, his stoicism, his optimism, and his patience is an example for all of us, and we should inshallah follow in that example. My talk will be hopefully brief, but I'm primarily addressing the youth of the community, because it is very important to understand that online and offline, whatever you see and hear is clearly very distressing, very disturbing, painful, and often makes us emotional. But we must ensure that our responses are measured, practical, clever, and political. This is about land. This is not a war between religions. And that is very important to remember. So with that preamble, I would like to start with my next slide. Farhan, please. I'm going to give a background of the historical perspective to the present crisis. So first of all, the most basic fundamental question: what are Israel and Palestine? Briefly, Israel is an officially Jewish country, a Jewish state, a self-proclaimed Jewish state, and the world acknowledges that, which is located in the Middle East, and it borders with other countries. These are Jordan in the east, Egypt in the west, Lebanon in the north, and in the northeast, Syria. The Palestinians, who have been living in that land for time immemorial, are a set of two, currently live in a set of two physically separate territories alongside Israel. When Israel was created, I will come to what happened, but currently the Palestinians reside primarily in two areas: the West Bank, named so because it borders on the west bank of the River Jordan, and then Gaza, which is in the east, and it is a strip of land which is adjacent to the Mediterranean Sea. Gaza and West Bank are not independent states. They may have provisional governments that are of different political nature, but essentially they are ruled by Israel, and whatever Israel wants, that happens. And so therefore, these are titular states. They are not really independent states. There is at present no independent state of Palestine. We often hear about settlements. Settlements are encroachments upon land that belongs to the Palestinians, which allows residence to any person who can prove that they are a Jew, whether they are from Israel or whether they are from Europe, Asia, anywhere in the world, has a right to do what is called aliyah. And aliyah means going back or going to these settlements. These, under international law, are illegal. Even Britain recognizes that these settlements are not legal entities. And therefore that needs to be borne in mind. And that is why we must constantly reinforce the view that this is about land. Both Israelis and Palestinians have claims to the land, make claims to the land going back centuries. But the present day states that we see are relatively new. Next slide, please. This is a map of Israel that I was saying. It is also showing us the two areas where Palestinians primarily live: Gaza on the west and Jerusalem on the east by the River Jordan, which is the West Bank. And next slide. And this is the historical encroachment of land that has occurred by Israel. Israel was given, and I'll come to that, how it was formed, an area of land, but after 1948 there was an expulsion of almost 750,000 Palestinians from their villages. Not just an expulsion, but there were massacres carried out in villages in Israel. And there were huge atrocities, human rights violations that were carried out, and therefore a lot of the Palestinians had to leave in diaspora. And over time, as you can see, from 1947, 1967, the green areas, which are the areas belonging to where the Palestinians live, are basically being encroached upon. And on the right is the present day situation. Very different from the initial formation and geographical borders that were allocated to Israel. Next, please, Farhan. And this is a magnified photo of Gaza. Gaza, as you can see, is just a narrow strip of land, a few kilometers wide and very thin, which essentially is bordered by a fence which is regulated by the Israelis. And the occupiers, the oppressors, have always ensured that they decide what goes in and what comes out. Also, the Mediterranean shore has got the oppressors deciding who utilizes the sea in terms of, for example, fishing rights. And you may have heard not so long ago, a few young teenagers were playing football on the beach in Gaza and they were killed. Initially, of course, as always happens, they say it's the Palestinians who've killed them, but very soon the truth, as Imam Ibrahim was saying yesterday, comes to light. Nobody can hide the truth. And what I'm going to say today is incontrovertible and cannot be challenged. Next, please. And this is the West Bank. This is a magnified image of the West Bank, and it's a complex slide, but all the dots, the blue dots and the red, are the illegal settlements. So essentially this is provisionally an area that belongs to the Palestinians under the titular sort of rulership of the Palestinian Authority, but in reality Israel and the oppressors decide who can settle in that land. And currently, whilst our concentration is on Gaza, it's very important we don't forget the West Bank. The West Bank is where, unbeknownst and unseen almost in the Western media, there is almost like a second Nakba going on. And the Financial Times, which is above reproach, it is not a left-wing newspaper, recently on Friday gave an article that is worth reading. You should go online and read it. And it tells you the despicable atrocities that are being carried out. People who have lived in villages for decades are being told, leaflets are being sent that leave now or we will kill you. There's no two alternatives. And there are instances recorded in the Financial Times, reported by them, where humiliation has been meted out to those people and they have been expelled and even killed. So this is the West Bank. Why are Israelis and Palestinians in conflict? The conflict is over who gets land and how that land is controlled. The execution of that is complex. Where are the borders? The Palestinian refugees return to their former homes in present-day Israel is a human right of every Palestinian whose parents, whose ancestors have been removed from their villages and their lands, and who have nothing to show for that but the keys that their grandfathers and great-grandfathers left to them as a memory of the place that was lost. So in 1948, 700,000, more than that, were expelled from their homes in present-day Israel. They have 7 million descendants all over the world. Next, please, Farhan. But history is important, and I would urge especially my young brothers and sisters to look at the history. It's all available. There are some fantastic books. James Barr has written a very good book called A Line in the Sand. And you will know that 3 major events are extremely important that every one of you knows and is able to use in any discussion on and offline. The first is the secret Sykes-Picot Pact, 1916. The second is the Balfour Declaration, which 106 years, exactly 106 years ago, in fact, and 2 days, i.e. because it was signed on the 2nd of November. And the third is the end of the Ottoman Empire and the betrayal of the Arabs, which I will allude to. Next, please. On the left is Mr. Mark Sykes. He was a so-called Orientalist. He had gone, his father is an aristocrat, later became the advisor to the British government and to Balfour, who I'll come to. And he claimed to be an expert in the Middle East. He had been on holidays with his dad for a few times and knew a few words of Arabic. And in those colonial days, anybody who did that became an expert in Arab affairs and in the Middle East. And on the right is his compatriot, a French diplomat, François-Georges Picot. François-Georges Picot and Mark Sykes made an agreement that after the end of the First World War, the Levant, or that area which is Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, will be divided. The colonialists will never give up on a colony, even if physically they have left it. And we know from what they did in Algeria. In the Algiers, the excuse was that 2 Jewish merchants who had sold wheat to the French naval officers off the shore were not paid. And the Ottoman governor summoned the French ambassador and reprimanded him with a fly whisk. And that was a casus belli of the invasion of Algeria. And what they did in Algiers, the French came and in the big square in front of the nobles and the Muslims, they violated the dignity of the Muslim women. That's how the colonialism works. But now that there is no physical colony, they still want to influence who controls the resources. But that's a digression. Let's go back to Francois Picot and Mark Sykes. Next slide, please. And this is the line they drew. Remember that this is the Levant. Marx and Sykes said that the British and French government will divide the Levant into two areas. In the north, which is the green area, dark green is a pure colony, light green is an area of influence. That's another diplomatic term, which means that we are the rulers. You will listen to us. And then the grey and the dark grey areas will belong to Britain as areas of influence. The north, the French area of influence was Syria and Turkey. In fact, General George, I've forgotten his name, when he came to Syria, when the French came to Syria, he put his foot on the tomb of Salahuddin Ayyubi and said, Saladin, we are back, which refers to the Crusades, because the wars have actually started 1,000 years ago. The next slide, please. And then in 2017, this man, Mr. Balfour, he later on became the Prime Minister and also the Foreign Secretary to the government of Britain. He persuaded the UK Cabinet to guarantee a land for the Zionist Federation of the UK. It was actually started as a primarily secular movement that started after the Dreyfus affair in France. And what he persuaded the cabinet to essentially guarantee or to enable a state, a Zionist state, a Jewish state in Palestine. Anybody who says there was no country called Palestine, ask them to read the Balfour Declaration. It says that the country will be established in Palestine. So Palestine didn't just, wasn't a figment of our imagination, it existed. It existed long time before Israel. And he addressed this to Lord Rothschild. You may have heard of the Rothschild. He was a big Zionist. And essentially what the British were doing was they were giving land that belonged to someone else, without the agreement of the land of the people to whom that land belonged, which is a complete colonial arrogance and patronizing attitude towards their colonial subjects. Next, please. But pari passu with that, Sykes-Picot, and by the way, the Sykes-Picot agreement also involves Tsarist Russia, and it was the communist Bolsheviks who exposed that because it was a secret pact, much to the embarrassment of the British establishment. But the betrayal of the Arabs was going on at the same time. Henry McMahon was the High Commissioner of Egypt because Egypt was also under the protection, which is quite ironic, of the British. And what they did was that McMahon, assured the Sharif of Mecca that once the war is over, once the Ottomans are defeated, all the Arabs will be given the right to their freedom, to their governorship, sovereignty, and this was all a lie, because it was immediately betrayed. It had already been betrayed because the Sykes-Picot was in 2016 before this. These series of correspondences are available on Google for all to see. So again, the British guaranteed freedom for the Arabs and an Arab state. Next, please. Just a brief timeline. Then what happened in 1940s and 30s? There was the terrible crime. We should all condemn that crime. We condemn that crime. Nobody can accuse us of saying we don't do that. The Holocaust was a crime. Throughout history, when the Spanish reconquisters, Isabella and Ferdinand, expelled the Jews, they were protected and they were given refuge in North Africa. These people are still called the Pieds Noirs because they used to wear black shoes, their descendants, and therefore Pieds Noirs means black feet. So what happened then was that the Holocaust was perpetrated by the Germans and also Eastern Europeans. Many of the pogroms and the horrible cruelties that were meted upon the Jews and communists and socialists and LGBTQT, these were also persecuted by Hitler and the Nazis. These were not carried out by Muslims or by Palestinians. But the Palestinians are paying the price for that. The sins of the fathers of the Germans and Eastern Europeans who committed genocide on the Jews and others are being paid by the Palestinians, and that is a great injustice. Then in 1967, in 1948, the Nakba occurred, I referred to that. In 1973, there was the Yom Kippur War, when Egypt and Syria attacked in order to rescue their captured territories, and Israel would easily have lost had it not been for a massive influx of weapons from the United States. And then we have, in 2005, Israel said that they will leave Gaza, but they still occupied, they still influenced what happened in Gaza, so it was a Pyrrhic victory for Palestinians. And since then, in 2008, 2009, 12, 14, 16, there have been attacks on Gaza. Most notably, in 2019, peaceful Palestinians from Gaza demonstrating within their own boundary. It was called the March of Great Return. Every Friday, 223 at least Palestinians were shot like shooting duck by the Israelis from the other side of the fence. One of them was a young nurse, one of them was a journalist. They were all people peacefully protesting. When I say peacefully protesting, they may have thrown a stone or a rocket, which is like a firecracker, and then they were killed and picked up. But anyway, the conflict continued. And it comes to October 2023, and I don't need to tell you about what's happening now. Next paragraph. This is a very important demographic slide. Remember that? Take the figures in your mind. In Israel, the population of Israelis is 9.3. A large number of Israelis are occupying in the settlements. They are actually Americans. If you look at the news broadcast, you will find various accents. They're from all over the world. Australian, South African, Scottish, not too far from Glasgow, and Americans, lots of Americans. And so their whole population is 9.3, but there are 14.3 Palestinians and growing, mashallah. The Palestinians will not go away. You can kill 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, but unless you put a nuclear bomb in Gaza, there will be survivors. They will rise after the night of danger and threat and fear. There will be a dawn, as Imam Ibrahim said yesterday. And with apologies to Maya Angelou, they will rise, and yet they will rise. Those little children that we see, and there is a term in the health service now in Gaza, which is called WC, Wounded Child, NSF, No Surviving Family. In the 21st century, no child anywhere, in Israel, in Britain, in America, in Palestine, in Ukraine, no child should have that label, WC, NSF. It's a disgrace and an insult to humanity. Next slide, please, Farhan. It won't be very long, and we will, inshallah, do our salam. So, recent crises are also very important to look at the background of what's going on. In 1991 was the first Gulf War. Remember, in that first Gulf War, there was a girl called Nayyira, who was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. And she was made to lie that the Iraqi soldiers are throwing babies out of incubators. So remember the old adage, and later she was exposed, and even the Americans accepted that. They used that lie to persuade the American population to attack Iraq. It's all in history, it's not my invention. All of these things can be verified. So similarly, there will be lots of lies that you will see online and offline. Always go to the bottom of it. And I say, don't get your history from Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, that's all bunkum. These are just snapshots. Get a book, go and do some in-depth research. Then we had the crippling sanctions on Iraq, in which 500,000 Iraqis died. The problem is that, as someone said, one death is a tragedy if you tell about that death in the news all the time and you name the person, whereas the death of 1 million is a mere statistic. And so don't get desensitized to what is happening. Then there was the so-called Arab Spring that didn't last very long. In 2011, we saw what happened in Egypt, we saw what happened in Tunisia. I don't need to talk about that just now. And then there was the destruction of Libya, which was clearly a destruction of our economy. And then, you know, they cry that all these migrants are coming from sub-Saharan Africa. Well, Libya was the buffer. They were employing these people. You reap what you sow. There is nothing without consequence. And then recently, this horrible Abraham's Accord, in which there is an effort that all these Arab countries and Muslim countries should start recognizing Israel, which is a disgrace. Next one, please. I think I've only got 1 or 2 slides. So how is it all going to end? There are 2 main possibilities. A one-state solution. If you have a one state, I've shown you the demographics. It will be an election. If it is a free and fair election, it will be the Palestinians who will win. And if there's a 2-state solution, then that needs to be a viable solution. If you look at the map, the River Jordan, and they all go on about river to the sea, and this, I will again not make any comments on that. But on the one side is the river where there's a mass of Palestinians, and on the other side there's the sea where there's a mass of Palestinians. And you can't have Bantustans like used to happen in South Africa. You need to have a communication so that the Palestinian families that are split can communicate with each other. There needs to be a bridge. It doesn't mean that Israel shouldn't exist. Of course Israel should exist, but it should exist within the 1948 borders, for which there are so many resolutions, including Security Council resolution. Next paragraph. So in conclusion, my very brief tour of history tells us that Western powers have interfered in the Middle East for more than 1,000 years. That's not news. The end of World War I hasn't really happened. And that end of World War I gave the way to superpower neo-colonial hegemony. The expansionist state and its illegal occupation of Arab lands can no longer be ignored by the world. And the Palestinians are not going anywhere. They are probably, at this moment in time, the most courageous, most brave people in the world. I mean, they may break them. They may break a few, 1 or 2. You know, the atrocities that are happening are enough to break anybody. But I salute the resilience of those who are still there and who have said that we're not going anywhere, and inshallah they won't. An independent international inquiry is important to look into the past and current crimes of the oppressors, because we can't believe you. We remember the incubator story. We remember the massacre on the beach of the footballer story. Why should we believe you? Let an international organization look into it. And here I must disgrace the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, who raced to Ukraine to embrace Mr. Zelensky after the so-called massacre of Bucha, and immediately issued warrants for Mr. Putin. He should be racing now, as I speak. Get a ticket, Mr. Karim Khan. You call yourself a Muslim. Go to Gaza, go to Tel Aviv, and put out a warrant for the oppressors who are killing babies and committing genocide. And lastly, we need an immediate ceasefire and end to industrial scale massacres. These must be implemented. If you could skip one slide, and the last slide, please. I often quote this: all human beings are capable of doing good, and all human beings are capable of doing evil. This is a quote from Mark Antony's speech in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and is very relevant. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Let us hope there is a ceasefire and an end to the industrial scale massacre that is going on in Palestine. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakum Allah khairan, Dr. Izhar, barakallahu feek. So we'll break now for Asr Jama'ah, inshallah, and then afterwards we'll continue the program and we'll go to the sisters so that they can be prepared and ready, inshallah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا
تراصوا سووا الصفوف وسدوا الخلل الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله 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 أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. اللهم رحمك بأهل فلسطين يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا مغيث أغثهم يا الله. اللهم تقبل شهداءهم وشافي جرحاهم. اللهم وكن للمصابين والثكالى واليتامى والمساكين عونا ومعينا. اللهم كن للأرامل والثكالى عونا ومعينا. اللهم كن لهم نصيرا وظهيرا. اللهم اربط على قلوبهم وثبت أقدامهم وانصرهم على القوم الكافرين. اللهم يا ذا الجلال والعزة انصر المسلمين في غزة. اللهم عليك بالصهاينة المحتلين المجرمين. اللهم لا تمكنهم من ديار المسلمين. اللهم ردهم خائبين خاسرين مخزيين مكسورين. اللهم لا تقم لهم راية واجعل لنا فيهم آية. اللهم اكفناهم بما شئت وكيفما شئت يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تدبيرهم في تدميرهم وتدميرهم في تدبيرهم. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك اللهم من شرورهم. اللهم اقذف الرعب في قلوبهم وزلزل الأرض من تحت أقدامهم. يا جبار السماوات والأراضين انتقم منهم يا الله. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, inshallah, we'll listen now to Sisters Wala and Sister Aya. They're going to share with us a little talk, hopefully to express how many Muslims are feeling this now, and also to give us some words of advice and to inspire us, inshallah. And then we'll end the program with Imam Sheikh Ibrahim Al-Wawi. So I'll ask the sisters, are you set up? Do you have any need for any assistance? If you do, just let us know. Inshallah, we'll start in a minute or two.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you very much for coming today, dear brothers and sisters in Islam. Can I just encourage all the sisters to have a seat? If you have any children, feel free to put them in the crash. Okay? Okay. So inshallah we will make a start. A couple of weeks ago, they asked me to participate in this talk, and I refused. To be honest, I was very hesitant. I said, what will I do to help my brothers and sisters in Palestine? I'm too far from them, you know. Lots of people are speaking, you know, but when I went to the demonstration last week, we had Noor speaking, Noor Allah, we had Ayam Barki as well speaking, we had Rima Harbi, and those are all my students from the Friday school. So I thought, if my students are speaking in a demonstration, why should I not participate in this? So that's why I'm here today. And I thought about that verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَسَتُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ فَيُنَبِّئُكُم بِمَا كُنتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ Surah At-Tawbah. And say, do as you will, for Allah will see your deeds, and so will His Messenger and believers. And you will be returned to the knower of the unseen and the witness, and He will inform you of what you used to do. So I thought if every one of us would say no, how on earth would we support our brothers and sisters in Islam? They are being killed every day, okay? And here we can just try and do what we can to help them and support them. عن النعمان بن بشير رضي الله عنهما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مثل المؤمنين في تودهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم مثل الجسد الواحد إذا اشتكى منه عضو تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحمى. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The believers in their mutual kindness and compassion and sympathy are just like one body. When one of the limbs suffers, the whole body responds to it with wakefulness and fever. Anyways, I didn't come here to tell you that Israel is the oppressor and Palestine is the original owner of the land. And I didn't come to tell you that Britain was the main country that helped Israel cede the Palestinian lands, especially after signing the Balfour Treaty, Wa'd Balfour, in 1917, which was a promise of those who do not own to those who do not deserve. وعد من لا يملك لمن لا يستحق. I didn't come here to tell you about the Nakba in 1948 that led to the killing of thousands of Palestinians and the displacements of thousands more. I didn't come here to tell you about the massacres in Sabra and Shatila in 1982 and the Intifada, the first Intifada in 1987 and the second Intifada in 2000. I didn't come here to remind you about the killing of the innocent child, Muhammad al-Durram. I'm sure all of us are reminded of him. Okay, this was more than 25 years ago now. And in the recent incidents, most of his family members were killed and massacred. Also, I didn't come here to tell you that whole families have been wiped out of the registry. Whole families have been wiped out of the registry, and a whole generation of school pupils, younger school pupils and university students of different age groups have either been killed or displaced due to the recent incidents. I didn't come here to remind you that Masjid Al-Aqsa is Masjid Al-Aqsa, أولى القبلتين, ثالث الحرمين الشريفين. Muslims used to first pray towards it, and it is considered to be the third holy mosque after the two holy mosques in Mecca and Medina. What I'm actually here to tell you is that a genocide, it's a deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic minority with the sole aim of wiping and destroying that nation. As an English teacher, the verb to Israel has been successfully added to the English dictionaries, and it means when a person claims something that belongs to you as theirs, so they are stealing our lands. What happens in Palestine nowadays must be a wake-up call to each and every one of us. Do not underestimate what you can do to help your brothers and sisters and how you can support them. Surely, each one of us must be talented in something, excel in it, and renew your intention, وَلِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, and use it to support your brothers and sisters in Palestine. So I'll just remind you of some quick reminders from our Islamic history. Mus'ab ibn Umayr was the first ambassador in Islam. He was one of the famous people in Mecca from a very rich tribe. He was handsome, he was well dressed, and he used those assets to be the first ambassador in Islam. Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he ordered one of the Sahaba, Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Thabit, yes, he was one of the companions to go and learn the language of the Jews. And he asked him to try and excel in that language. Do you know what he did? He went and he learned the language of the Jews in only 15 days. Not only he learned the language of the Jews, he excelled in it. He knew the culture of the Jews as well. So you can learn a language in 15 days or even less than this if you just put your mind to it. Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was only known as the sword of God, Sayfullah al-Maslul. He was never defeated in any of his military battles. Okay? I can also tell you about some modern role models that we can relate to. Some of the people will tell me, how can we act as the Sahaba? How can we, those Sahaba, they had really strong religion. Their faith was really grounded. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فما أوتيتم من شيء فمتاع الحياة الدنيا وما عند الله خير وأبقى للذين آمنوا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. So whatever thing you have been given, it's but for the enjoyment of the worldly life. But what is with Allah is better and more lasting for those who have believed and upon their Lord rely. For example, I can tell you about Uns Gabir. I'm sure every one of us know about her. She is a famous tennis player. She is from Tunisia, and she refused to celebrate. She won the WTA finals, and she refused to celebrate, and she said, children and babies are dying every day, and she donated part of her prize to the Palestinians. So now we're talking about modern role models that we can look up to, that we can imitate, and they are not from the companions, they are not from the Sahaba. I'll speak about someone who is Egyptian, Bassem Youssef, for example. He used to be a cardiologist, now he is a comedian, and he managed to hold 2 very successful interviews with Piers Morgan, the British broadcaster, and both interviews, they helped in changing the Western perspective on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through the layout of historical facts, satire, and black comedy as well. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وآخرين من دونهم لا تعلمونهم الله يعلمهم وما تنفقوا من شيء في سبيل الله يوفى إليكم وأنتم لا تظلمون سورة الأنفال. Prepare any strength you can muster against them and any cavalry with which you can overawe God's enemy and your own enemy as well and others beside them whom you don't know but who are known to God. Anything you spend in the way of God will be repaid to you in full. You will not be wronged. So, think about that verse. We always hear about that verse with a negative connotation in our mind that it's speaking about people who are destroying things, people who are killing. But think about the positive connotation, the positive meaning of that verse. Okay? How can we practically support the Palestinians? How can we help our dear brothers and sisters in Islam, in Palestine, who are being massacred every day in cold blood? First of all, know the language of your enemy. Learn the language, and when I tell you to learn the language, not just the language, know the culture, know their weak points, know their strong points, know how to interact with them. Secondly, study the Holy Quran. There must be a very important reason why more than the third of the Holy Quran speaks about Bani Israel and what they did with different prophets and messengers. So there is a lesson for us to learn from the Holy Quran. Also, we must know that this is not just a war about the land. This is a psychological war between the Palestinians and the Jews. And when I mean the Palestinians here, I mean the Muslims and the Jews. Okay? So, tell me how many pictures in the media you have seen of the Jews that are being killed and their victims. None. Okay? You will only see the Jews, they are sitting in very nice gardens, they will do their hair, they have full makeup on, and they are speaking about the fact that the Palestinians have stolen their land. On the other side, you will see the Palestinians, they are running after their martyrs, they are burying them in the ground, they are crying, they are screaming, and their houses are brought up to the ground. This is what we see, okay? So think about the effect of seeing those images on yourself and your families, okay? Sometimes you will need to check which channels you are following, which programs you are watching. I know that we need to keep up to date, but still, think about the negative effect and the positive effect of what you are watching, and see what's happening with the Jews. And do not underestimate the power of boycotting the products that you can, the products and the brands that we use every day. And as a teacher, please, and this is again for me as well, read a lot from trusted books and authentic resources about the history of that conflict to educate yourself and your children about the importance of that issue in our hearts. One of my intentions today was to come with the Palestinian flag. I forgot my flag, okay? But the issue itself, it's in my heart, it's in my mind, in my intention, okay? So do not let that conflict make you lazy in achieving any of your targets. If you work, excel in your work. If you study, study even harder. This is for all our pupils and students. Do not think that, why do I need to study? The world will have a third world war or something bad will happen. Just do what you can. Do what you can in your own place. If you memorize Quran, do you know what? Memorize even more. If you are studying Aqidah, study even more. Educate yourself. Even if you are just cooking food for your family, do you know what? Make an intention to cook food for the next generation that will come, that will help those who are oppressed, whether they are in Palestine or any other place. And remember, Allah is all-knowing, Allah is all-seeing, Allah sees everything that happens to us. And what's happening nowadays to the Muslims in Palestine and to the Muslim Ummah, Allah is not punishing us. This is a test, it's a tribulation, it's an ibtila, okay? Look at it with a positive mindset. And look on the bright side. Do not let the shaitan bring you down to the ground. Okay? وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Do not despair of God's mercy. None but those who deny the truth despair of God's mercy. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ إِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ قَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمَ قَرْحٌ مِثْلُهُ وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَلَيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. And do not become faint of heart, nor grieve. You will have the upper hand if you are believers. If you are believers. If you have suffered a wound, they too have suffered a similar wound. We bring these days to men by terms, so that God may know those who believe and choose witnesses from among you. And God does not love the unjust. I hope, I'm really passionate about the topic today. I hope that I was not shouting. I hope that everyone has benefited from it. It's just I would like to thank Dr. Izhar for his speech today, and I would like to thank him for what he has done yesterday in the demonstration. There was a moment in the demonstration where there was about to happen, there was a very huge fight that was about to happen between the Muslims who were doing the demonstration and the girl who was singing. And Dr. Izhar, may Allah bless him, interfered and made everyone calm down. So, Jazakumullah khairan, brother Dr. Izhar, for interfering yesterday, and Jazakumullah khairan for listening today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we will have Ayah, inshallah, to speak today. So I would like everyone to listen really carefully to what Ayah will say. Inshallah, Ayah is a dear daughter of one of my friends, so I'm expecting, inshallah, her speech will be good.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ayah Mahmood, and I'm a second-year law student. And I'm a Palestinian who has been brought up in the UK as a result of my grandparents being displaced from Palestine due to the Nakba, which displaced my family to all across the world and deprived us from a chance to grow up in our own homeland. Recently, the Western media has been pushing a narrative that Israel is under attack. We are seeing Western leaders issuing commendation after commendation. The world is trying to paint a picture of Palestinians attacking Israel for no reason at all. The Palestinians have been occupied since 1948. That is 75 years, and are living under an apartheid system. Israel's policy of settling its civilians in occupied Palestinian territories and displacing the local population contravenes with international humanitarian law, the UN, Amnesty International, and other non-governmental organizations. They have all documented mass human rights violations as a result of Israel's occupation. Palestinians are constantly living in inhumane conditions and are completely stripped away from all of their fundamental human rights. On a daily basis, Palestinians face imprisonment, their homes are demolished, their land is stolen, they are prevented from moving freely, water and electrical supplies are cut off to villages, hospitals are being bombed, schools are being bombed, places of worship are being bombed. We cannot claim to have universal justice and peace until the false imprisonment, the ethnic cleansing, the murder, the land theft, preventing people from basic necessities, and portraying the victim as the oppressor comes to an end. Their right to life is constantly being restricted. Children, men, women, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, friends, they are all people. They have a family, just like us, just like people everywhere. And it's being taken away from them. Their right to be free from torture is being taken away, constantly living in fear. Children are growing up surrounded by the sounds of bombings instead of laughter and birds and peace. In fear of being faced with unjustified imprisonment, not knowing if the meal they're about to have is going to be their last, not knowing if they'll be here in the morning, if their parents will be, if their children will be. There's not enough fuel to source hospitals, lack of water, there's a lack of food. People are queuing up all day long in order to have just the tiniest amount of water. This is disgusting. This is so inhumane. I don't even have the words to describe what's going on. Since 2007, there has been a full land, sea and air blockade on the Gaza Strip, making it the world's largest open-air prison. Nowhere to go for 2.2 million people. For context, you can go from the most northern part of Gaza to the most southern part in about 30 minutes max. That's like driving from Bridge of Dee to Bridge of Dawn, and there's 2.2 million people in that small strip of land. And how humane is it to displace 1.2 million people and then later bomb an area that was supposedly be the safe route? The amount of videos and media I've seen of this that spread all over, and people are still refusing to open up their hearts, they're refusing to open up their eyes and see it. Palestinians are recording what's happening, not for us, not for their families to see, for the world to see. They're speaking in Arabic, not their native language at all. I mean, in English, not their native language, in order so the West can understand what's going on. They're trying to show us we are their voices. Just to add quickly, we are the voices of Palestine. They are completely isolated. We have a duty to talk about the injustice they are facing. They are trying to show the world the inhumane treatment they've been facing for the 75 years of occupation. We have to do things like boycotting. Like, it's not that deep to not get a coffee from Starbucks or to go to Costa or something when it costs people their lives. Loads of our governments are funding genocide. These companies are funding genocide, and we need to put a stop to it. And at the end of the day, we can't be a nation defended by Allah and protected by Allah. Assalamu alaikum.
جزاكم الله خيرا. بارك الله فيكم, sisters Wala and sister Aya. So we'll conclude now with Imam Ibrahim.
Can I ask all the brothers to come closer, please?